So for this video, I'm going to be talking about how you can audit an Excel spreadsheet. And before we get into the details of auditing an Excel spreadsheet, I do want to point out that we will be working inside the Sales 2018 Sheet tab. So make sure you have this sheet selected. So sometimes when someone sends you a spreadsheet, either a colleague or a coworker, it might be hard to understand how the spreadsheet is functioning. Since you didn't create the spreadsheet yourself, at first glance, it's hard to know which cells have formulas in them, and then it's hard to know which cells affect those formulas. But with formula auditing, Excel allows us to display these relationships between formulas and their cells. So if we come up to the Formulas tab, and within the Formula Auditing group, the two options I want to discuss first are Trace Precedents and then Trace Dependents. Now, Trace Precedents shows arrows that indicate which cells affect the value of the currently selected cell. For example, if I click this total here in cell G3 and then select Trace Precedents, this dark blue arrow starting from quarter 1 all the way to the total signifies that each one of these cells affect the value of this cell, because in this cell we have a formula that includes these cells. And to remove this arrow, we can click Remove Arrows. Now if we want to see which cells affect this percent of total cell, we can select this cell and then Trace Precedents. Now we have a thin blue arrow for this total, and then another blue arrow from the grand total to this cell. Because to get the percent of total, we have a formula in this cell that takes the total of the north division and divides it by the grand total. Now for a little bit more complicated one. If we remove these arrows and then click in this bonus cell and then trace the precedents for this cell, now we have multiple arrows pointing back to this cell. Because for this cell, in order to get a bonus of $2,500, the percent of total for this division has to be within 20% and 25%. And since the North Division got 23%, that division got a bonus of $2,500. But if the percent of total was between 26% and 30%, the bonus would have been $5,000. So all these cells are used within our formula. And these cells affect the outcome of this bonus cell. So that's tracing precedents. Now let's trace the dependents for this cell. If we remove the arrows and then select Trace Dependents, there are no dependents for this cell because this cell doesn't affect the value of another cell. But if we choose a different cell, for example this 2,500 in the bonus table, and we trace the dependents for this cell, we can see that these cells are affected by the value of this cell. For example, if I change this 2,500 to 3,000, we can see that the 2,500 changed in the North Division and in the South Division. And if I undo that action, those cells change back to the 2,500. Because the value of these cells depend on the value of this cell. And then we can remove those arrows. So by tracing precedents and dependents, we can easily see which cells depend on other cells and which cells get affected by other cells.